Commentary by RJ Martin. This is not legal advice.
Alrighty, we had some fun at the GG's last night. Basically, they arrested Phil for suspected of camping, but what they're really always using is this move on power. And since they brought this move on power in, they've just nothing but abused it, I feel.
Well, that goes without a shadow of a doubt. There was no camping gear out. They were asked to move back into the car park, which they did. The previous arrangement, they could stand where they were standing. They were always respectful. They have been utterly respectful for the whole time they've been there. They've given no cause for concern at all. Whenever the gates open, the cars travelling out, they make sure there's plenty of space. There's no threat, no rude gestures, nothing.
So it's interesting here with the filming. They're showing footage from night time when people are being removed. And I don't know what time at night it was, but then they are showing people's behaviour in the daytime, which may or may not be reflective of the nighttime behaviour. And also we have the general concept of the tension between freedoms for people and not interfering with the freedoms of other people. But move on powers would be a different topic for me to discuss later on perhaps. But I'm just making that observation.
We should stop looking for justifications or reasons why. We know why they're doing this, and it's got nothing to do with law. They are terrified. They know their world is coming to an end. They know that. And like a cornered rat, they're scratching. Now,
obviously, when you have also the likes of Riccardo Bosi from Australia One, which is an unregistered political party, which is an actual thing. You can have a political party that is not registered, and that's perfectly legal. It doesn't have benefits that a registered party has though, such as logos on ballot papers, etc. But that's beside the point. They're just clarifying there some information for some people. But you do have people like Riccardo Bosi and Craig Cole, both of Australia One, who have made threats to people in Parliament, such as about hanging people, hanging police, judges, journalists, doctors. Craig Cole said about bringing an M60 machine gun into Parliament for his maiden speech and then mowing everyone down. So, I'm surprised they haven't been arrested and then charged with terrorism-related offences, or even like more simple offences, even though they're still indictable. But things like using carriage service to make threats or extortion or many other charges that exist. There are particular charges within the Criminal Code Act 1995, which is a Commonwealth piece of legislation, and that includes special punishment for threats to Commonwealth public officials. And there are a lot of people going around calling themselves CPO and Commonwealth public official that are not, but the point is that if they were arrested for that, then they would be ineligible to run for Parliament, because under Section 44 of the Constitution, it has certain ineligibilities to run for Parliament, one of which includes if you are charged with an offence that carries a maximum penalty of 12 months or longer. So if there's a charge, say, that has a maximum penalty of 3 years, 5 years, even 1 year, then you are ineligible to run for Parliament. That also brings about another question as to why Riccardo Bosi has not been charged for running in the Queensland state election and being on the Queensland electoral roll at an address registered at Mooloolaba, when he clearly, it seems, was a New South Wales resident that did not even reside in Queensland. And I've done various videos on that. I'll have it in the description, going through in the context of various threats to people, including the Governor General, politicians, government ministers, and the judiciary, that the people would be moved on to potentially prevent a breach of the peace or terrorist attack or whatever. Also, with threats to the Governor General and the parliamentarians and the ministers and even the judiciary, it could be seen as treason. And the Constitution at Section 44, subsection 2, relevantly reads, Any person who is attainted of treason or has been convicted and is under sentence or subject to be sentenced for any offence punishable under the law of the Commonwealth or of a state by imprisonment for 1 year or longer. Attainted of treason, what that means is publicly accused in a formal manner, i.e., the government has brought treason charges against someone. There is the interesting concept of what you do if the government itself is doing treason, but that's a separate story. And anyway, if someone is subject to be sentenced for an offence punishable by the law of the Commonwealth or the state of 12 months or longer, then that could well include if people are being actively investigated after being charged with such offences. Also, another interesting thing is why wasn't Riccardo Bosi charged for being apparently a New South Wales resident, who then, if he was a New South Wales resident, and it appears so, that he obviously was registered on the Queensland electoral roll as a resident of Queensland without fulfilling the requirements for that, i.e. being a resident of Queensland. And I do have videos which are separate to this, which I'll put links in the description below that go into it in more detail. But he was on the electoral roll and ran for the seat of Nicklin in the Queensland state election. And that very much appears to be unlawful for many reasons, which I have discussed in my former videos on the topic, and includes sentences exceeding 1 year prison sentence. Why did the government not do better investigations and charge Riccardo if that is the case? And I know that the government knows because I went to the police in Queensland and they fobbed me off and just told me to send an email to the Queensland Electoral Commission, which I did. And this was, just after the election, after I confirmed the information. And Riccardo Bosi was registered at an address in Mooloolaba that he was not residing at, apparently. And the result from that was the Queensland Electoral Commission merely told me to write the same thing, or also I think they might have forwarded it on themselves, but write the same thing to the Commonwealth Electoral Commission for them to investigate, because they're like Big Brother, so to speak. That was a couple of years ago, and nothing's happened from it, apparently.
Those pricks out, because every single politician that your friends have voted for has remained silent on children being raped, trafficked and murdered. And you also get to finish off, I promise you this, you also get what's called a maiden speech. Now I might be being forward, but hey, let's all manifest this. You get what's called a maiden speech. And your maiden speech is supposed to be all nice and warm and fluffy. Well, stuff that. I'm going to get out the M60 and mow every single one of them down and call them out for every single corrupt pricks that they are. There you go. With as much light and love as possible, of course. Just to finish, people say to me, oh Craig, you're a bit aggressive, you swear a bit much. Shit! There's children getting raped, trafficked and murdered. I think a few F-bombs are necessary.
You're passionate.
And this is no conspiracy, this is fact. We will prevail and we will get through. Thank you very much for your time. God bless you all.
It's going to take time.
Thanks, Rick. And just to follow up on that, if I am fortunate enough to be elected by the electors and do get a seat in Parliament, there's a lovely thing called a maiden speech. And your maiden speech is supposed to be all warm and fuzzy and oh yes, and I grew up in Gladstone Park. Stuff that. I'm getting out the M60 and I'm going to mow them all down. I'm going to call every single one of them out for being the dirty, rotten, stinking pedophile protectors they are. They sat there like cowards. every judge, every senior sergeant, every chief inspector that's protected pedophile trash, you're up for the high jump too, because I couldn't give a stuff. How do you reckon the Maiden Speech is going to look now? Pretty good? And you can sell tickets for question time in Parliament as well too. Mr. Speaker can kiss my ass. Thanks, Rick. I just have another question.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the next member for Casey.
Listening to, and you know, you can almost see the producer in the back going, cut, he's killing you. Within 24 hours, our foreign minister, that bloated cow, our foreign minister, was saying, oh, well, you know, the leadership of the World Health might be a bit dodgy at times, but essentially they do good work. So I knew I'd hit them hard exactly where it mattered. And Maurice Payne, you know, our foreign minister, Maurice Payne, if we hang her, I'm not sure she's guilty of anything. And if she's not, good luck to her, but if she is, we're going to have to get an arrestor cable off an aircraft carrier to suspend the weight. Now, see, that's a rude thing. I say that sort of thing all the time.
Now, these mindless drones, the Australian Federal Police, and you know, if 80% are on our side, here's a tip. Take off the badge, take off the gun and stand with us. But you don't, because you're cowards.
Such videos are very powerful. You can see a lot of instances of that in the USA, and they do make for powerful videos, and it's like the joining of hands, everyone from the police and the protesters, because invariably it's a protest, joined together collegially, etc. But in the context of people threatening to murder police officers, the Governor General, politicians, etc., if they pull off their gun and put it on the ground, in which case that's very stupid anyway, but the point is that someone might well pick up that gun and start shooting people in this case.
And you're pedophile protecting cowards, and you're either pedophiles or you're protecting them. But that's what you are.
Again, you know, there's ridiculous claims made by Riccardo Bosi, and I do understand the whole concept of, you know, the list by Bill Heffernan of people who were apparently investigated and then cleared by the police in preliminary investigations, or there was not enough evidence to, you know, bring about charges or whatever. If someone writes a list and gives it to the police and it just says these 5,000 people are weirdos, then obviously the police would require more evidence to verify that and justify that. But anyway, my opinion of Riccardo Bosi is that he basically saw where the wind seems to be flowing and cottoning onto these certain topics and then going with them because it is in his interest to do so, as opposed to some of the topics it seems that he's not even well read in those fields. I'm not saying about this directly, like, you know, the pedophile protection orders or whatever, but it does appear that there's certain topics where they have gained popularity on the internet. Then he appears to absorb those as policies for Australia One and not necessarily believe in those things or be well researched in those things, but you know, just taking these policies on board to be more popular, that kind of thing. Also, making false accusations against people to try and bring them on your side often doesn't work. There was a case many years ago in semi-feudal Japan where they received modern weaponry, but the point is there were 3 armies and 2 were supposed to be buddies in an alliance and fight against the other one. There was a very powerful enemy, and the second army hesitated and looked like they were going to not participate or whatever, and then the first army shot at with cannons and whatnot the second army, who were their allies, to propel them and compel them to attack the larger enemy, and that actually worked in that case. But it's easier to get people on side if you're not falsely accusing them of things. There is the opportunity for shaking people up to be more effective, But such false accusations, I don't believe, are very effective, as shown by the results.
So don't tell us you're on our side. You're not. You risk nothing. And I'll tell you what, soldiers are not necessarily the brightest. We're not the brightest people on the planet, but I can tell you what, we hate cowards. Because everyone that ever put on that military uniform has proven themselves to be a man of courage, a woman of courage.
So Riccardo is contradicting himself there as well, because he said the police are cowards or pedophiles or whatever because they won't put down their weapons and, you know, stand with the people. But then he says the soldiers are not. The point is that the army and the navy and the air force aren't putting down their weapons. Which from Mr. Bosi's statements he's made in the past and continues to make, that obviously those people are cowards by his definition because they're not standing up against the government. But I'm not saying they're cowards.
I can tell you the AFP have proven themselves to be something else. So here's a little tip to the AFP. You're really with us? Quit, because that's what most of us have done. Here's just a little insight into that.
So, presumably, Mr. Bosi, or Lieutenant Colonel retired Bosi, is referring to the military, and most of the military has not quit. It has been confirmed by a commando that I know, again retired, that Riccardo Bosi indeed was a Lieutenant Colonel in the Army.
The Defence Bank and ING, within a week of each other, have closed down all our accounts, personal and business. So what that means is, you know, the little toll counter doesn't work anymore, so we can't drive on the highways. What that means is we can't do anything because they're going to give us our money back, but we have no access. So they want electronic everything and no cash. So they've done that to me. Now, we're not fussed. I'm not having a whine about it. We expected that. We expected that to happen.
So ING is an investment bank, and presumably Mr. Bosi has a lot of investments, which is contradictory to his early videos. I've not seen the original, but I've seen a video where Mr. Bosi is talking about the original, where apparently he claimed that for many months he and his wife were living on rice and onions as their only sustenance. And in the video I saw, Mr. Bosi, or Lieutenant Colonel Bosi, has basically said, hey, look, you know, people were approaching me at protests with big slabs of meat, blah, blah, blah. I don't need it. We're not that bad, but I will go into how much retired lieutenant colonels of 26 years in the military receive as a military pension. But on top of that, obviously, Mr. Bosi is a book writer. He would have book sales. He also apparently does motivational speaking and contracting with private companies, including large private defense corporations. And, you know, presumably he doesn't have to live off onions and rice based on that. Basically, with the claims about the tollways, etc., then one, when your bank accounts are frozen, then generally you have access to a limited amount of funds to sustain yourself, as presumably Dave Oneglio or Dave Onigs would have found out, and there was Dottie as well, that they don't say you don't have $0 and you can't have any income, you can't buy any food, you can't pay your rent. It's generally done as, hey, look, you can live off $500 a week or something, as an example, depending on people's certain circumstances. You can also have, you know, X dollars for lawyers and whatnot. But with the tollways, then obviously we don't have physical barriers at tollways anymore. It's not like when you used to drive across the harbour bridge, I'd have a boom gate go down and put your little coins in a little machine, and before they had the automatic coin counters and you had actual people employed on the bridge in little booths, you just have the tags. And with the tollways, you have, say, 3 days as an example, to call them and pay the toll in a different manner. So you don't need the tag to beep. You can call them up and say, hey, look, my credit card number is XYZ, or debit card number, or, potentially just drive on the roads and not worry about the consequences in cases such as what's happened to Lieutenant Colonel retired Bosi and Dave Oneglio, etc., where they can just drive on the road, and when they get a big bill, just say, hey, look, I'm unable to pay it because of X, Y, Z, and even get the fees waived, potentially. Also, if Mr. Bosi was prepared and expecting his accounts to be frozen, which presumably he was, being a forward-thinking military officer, retired, then he would have had money stored away somewhere, presumably, to be able to spend money. Someone may be able to add these up, but Riccardo said that his wife is on a disability support pension and that he's on a carer allowance. Usually a carer allowance comes with a carer pension as well, but of course, the only people that know how much Riccardo's on is Riccardo himself, his spouse presumably, any financial planners, the tax man, so to speak, if, assuming that all things are declared. But as I said, we have the carer allowance, probably carer pension, disability support pension, because we're going as a family unit, donations, which may well be quite a lot of money, putting it nicely. Also from Riccardo's LinkedIn account, which is Riccardo-Bosi-8305-805. He has been in the army for 26 years, and that comes with certain retirement benefits. The information I have is that for 26 years of service, so long as he did not retire before the age of 45, the retirement age, it would be 44% of the salary of his last rank. His last rank was Lieutenant Colonel, which in the Australian Army is really the sixth highest position, but no one, is in a position of the first highest position. That's general, or some people say full general or 4-star general. Below that you have lieutenant general, which is the currently highest occupied position, and that is a 3-star general. Then you have a major general below that, which is 2-star, and then brigadier, which is a 1-star general, then colonel, i.e. full colonel, and below that is lieutenant colonel. So it's a very high position in the army. From memory, we haven't had a 4-star general or a full general, if you want to call it that, or just plain general, since World War II. We will see what the current pay rate is for lieutenant colonels, and then bear in mind that Mr. Bosi may be on 44% of that pay. So the remuneration currently for Lieutenant Colonel is a minimum of $134,055 per annum and a maximum of $301,560 per annum. So 44% of the minimum is $58,984.20, and of the maximum is $132,686.40. All of these things combined, he may well have other superannuation from his private life, if that's self-managed super fund, or if that is part of, superannuation as being an employee formally, then, that may be added on top. You also have book royalties, motivational speaking, and some other potential income. And this also doesn't include certain other allowances that are added on top. But that is just potentially how much the Bosi family may be on.
The next step we expect them to do is to take away my wife's disability pension and my carer's allowance, because that's what we live on. That's why we're constantly just sort of bouncing above zero.
If Mrs. Bosi's disability support pension is looking to be removed, and therefore Riccardo Bosi's carer allowance and perhaps a carer pension, then perhaps there's a reason why that is being removed. Such as if Mrs. Bosi isn't disabled enough, so to speak. We did hear for the Nicklin and also for the Eden Monaro by-election that Mr. Bosi looks after his wife and apparently she's wheelchair bound and can't do anything for herself, basically. That may be the case, but perhaps it's not the case, because why would the government remove the pension for a innocent bystander if there was reason to freeze Bosi's bank account and investment accounts anyway? Perhaps, and I'm not saying this is the case, but perhaps there was some issue with donation money. He may well be receiving a hell of a lot of money in donations. And obviously with Dave Oneglio and Dottie, that their accounts got frozen, then perhaps it is because of untoward things not necessarily occurring with those donations, but being investigated if they have occurred. And also you have concepts of not being a registered charity, etc. in some people's cases, but for Riccardo Bosi's that presumably would not be applicable because it's a donation presumably for Australia One. The party, interestingly enough, is actually registered as a business unit of Lionheart Australasia Pty Limited. You can look up ABN 46121251269. And then it's got company numbers and whatever as well, but you can find it from there. So they have business names within that entity. The entity is Lionheart Australasia Pty Limited, which apparently the main business location is in South Australia, postcode 5095, which is a bit peculiar, perhaps. And the business names are Australia One, A1 Association, Australia A1 Party, and A1 Party. And they've got different registration dates ranging from the 31st of October 2019 for A1 Party to the 4th of November 2020 for Australia One. Also, interestingly enough, the entity Lionheart Australasia Pty Limited has been registered for the goods and services tax since the 22nd of October 2006, which means that the business is expected to be over the GST threshold, which has changed over time, but it is currently $75,000, and therefore it could be concluded on the face of it that that entity is receiving at least $75,000 worth of income per year on top of, whatever other pensions and royalties and carers allowances, pensions, etc. that Mr. Bosi and his spouse may be on. And just to be precise, I should point out that if people donate money to Riccardo Bosi, that is separate from donations to the Australia One Party or to Riccardo Bosi in terms of being a candidate, because the latter two do have to be declared to the Australian Electoral Commission or Queensland Electoral Commission in terms of the previous election for the seat of Nicklin that Bosi ran in. So just pointing that out. And for those registries, you should be able to look up all of the donations and communication electoral expenditures.
We have risked everything for this, and we're going to keep going. If you think shutting our bank account is going to stop us, it's not. Now think about it. The Masonic filth in the banking industry that runs this country, and the Masonic filth is a mechanism by which it, and the bankers, man, I keep getting told, don't attack the banks till last, don't attack the banks till last. Well, here's a news flash for all the bankers. You're going to be seeing all your mates, your Masonic mates, in prison in the general population. So there's a word of warning for the bankers. It's coming. We know who you are. You've started on me. Keep it coming. Go on. Shut down more bank accounts. Do it. Cut off more pensions, because I bet you that's what they're going to do in the future to everybody else. They're already trying to break down the food chain, so we'll be fighting over a tin of tuna in the supermarket. Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see if the bankers take out Riccardo. Anyway, it does make a good point about food shortages. So I've been saying for a few years that people should be growing as much food as they can if they are in a position to do so. You know, obviously it's very hard if someone's, say, renting and they're not sure if their lease will be renewed in 6 months or a year or whatever, to spend lots of money to make, say, raised garden beds or put decent soil on the ground if your soil may be contaminated, that kind of thing. And then a lot of planting and time, effort, etc. But the more food that people can grow themselves, then one, the farmers can just export more food, so they shouldn't be worse off. But two, you can support yourself and save some money, and better for everyone, basically.
But ladies and gentlemen of the AFP, the bank, and all the rest of it, you pedophile protecting slime, your days are done. Come and get us. Oh, and by the way, as I said earlier, I'm now a candidate in the federal election, which means I have to be protected. So if you come anywhere near me, you will never see the light of fucking day again.
Protected by whom? And it sounds like it's self-protection, and again, let's see what happens. I doubt anything will, but let's find out.
But that's just a general message to anybody that wishes me any harm.
Excellent. And I say with that, with the move on powers, I say what they're doing with yourself and others, where they'll take away access to whether it's banking and all these sort of different things, are all ways of, we'll call it, influencing elections or influencing people. Yeah. And we've seen that again this week, where it's now multiple reports, Liberal and Labor have been sending out these registered to vote cards and then putting their return address, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
They're then collecting all of this information, email addresses, phone numbers, to do text messages. How is this allowed?
It's not allowed. It is vote harvesting. It's a scam that they've borrowed from the US, because Australian political parties, you know, their two brain cells couldn't spark fast enough to come up with a plan like, but they're stupid. Mm-hmm. They are stupid. Now the AEC has pretended to be shocked and outraged and said it's illegal, but they're doing nothing, because Tom Rogers, who heads up the AEC, is either corrupt, listen carefully, he's either corrupt or a complete fucking imbecile not to know what's going on.
That is incorrect. One, that's not what ballot harvesting is. And two, it is not illegal for political parties or candidates to send out postal vote applications, which they are then supposed to send to the AEC, but people should do it through the AEC directly. And even though it's not illegal, it does have drawbacks and should be illegal, especially for misleading and deceiving people, potentially. Of course, such claims need to be taken with a grain of salt. I don't endorse them, and that's Mr. Bosi's stated opinion, even though he hasn't stated that it is his opinion.
Now, I'm not saying he's corrupt. There's no evidence he's corrupt, so therefore he must be an imbecile. Now, how does an imbecile like that get a job like that? And for years, he has not taken the action required to run that organisation cleanly. So the AEC it's kabuki. They're pretending to do things. It's shadow puppets. So the Liberal Labor parties are sending out these requests for postal votes. Now, how is it, to reiterate your question, how is it possibly legal to send a document that apparently comes from the AEC, and then the return prepaid envelope goes to the local member? I've got one in my office, and I'll be speaking to Michelle Rowland from the seat of Greenway to explain what she knows about it, because she's either corrupt or an imbecile as well. Yeah. So there's only one or two choices here. So every politician, sitting member who is receiving this, you'll be getting a call from us. When we get control, every one of you, and understand this, we know everything. We know everything. We've got all the data. Nobody's getting away. Even those premiers who are planning their escape as we speak down in New Zealand.
And then also with the postal vote applications, of course, there can be untoward things, such as you get an indication that the person is going to vote for someone else, so you don't forward that on to the AEC, that kind of thing, as an example.
I won't give the names away just yet, but they are already planning their escapes. None of you are getting away. All of you will pay for the rest of your miserable lives. And like the, I can't remember his name, but the Spartan that betrayed the 300 under Leonidas, who told the Persians about the hot gates. Leonidas wished on...
So for many decades, there have been rumours about so-called elites around the world purchasing a lot of land in New Zealand, and that they would basically go hide there should there be, say, nuclear war and whatnot, because New Zealand is a developed economy far away from other places and not so-called important enough to bother nuking. You've got 2,000 kilometres or something between Australia and New Zealand as an example, and they also have certain terrain features which are beneficial, such as mountainous terrain, and there are a lot of underground bunkers being built there and sold off to elite families and individuals. That being said, I don't believe that Riccardo has some secret list of, premiers or whoever that are planning to move to New Zealand anytime soon. The days will be a lot darker before people actually start moving to their other bases or whatever, unless they have forethought, information as to what's about to occur just before it occurs, if that makes sense. So if certain people get told, hey, look, country X is making a move on country Y and whatever, then, those people who are tipped off with inside information can arrange for their families and then themselves to flee. But it's not like they can instantly transport to New Zealand either. A lot would be using commercial airlines, and there's no direct indication that stuff is about to hit the fan any time in the immediate future, if that makes sense, like within the next month or so. So Thermopylae, or Thermopylae, depending how you wish to pronounce it, means hot gates, and that's actually where the 300 Spartans plus their allies, which are often left out of the story, defended against the Persians. And it was a shepherd's track that Ephialtes, however you pronounce his name, led the around to, outflank the attack them from behind, etc.
Him a long life. I hope you live forever so you can live with your shame for eternity. And the same goes to every one of these corrupt bastards.
Excellent. Absolutely. And you've mentioned before that...
That contradicts Riccardo previously saying about Nuremberg 2.0 or Nuremberg 2, about hanging the politicians, civil servants, judges, whoever else was on the list.
Trump broke their system, and one of the ways that that's been done is that they had to push all of their election influencing techniques to the absolute extreme and expose them. And this week the RNC, which is the Republican National Committee, has pulled out of the presidential debates citing bias, and in particular was it Chris Wallace not letting Trump talk about the Hunter Biden laptop. This is just a bigger picture of how they influence masses rather than just individual votes.
So this is the same Chris Wallace who was photographed on Epstein Island. Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see.
Whose father was also a news anchor back in the 60s. So what's George Carlin saying? It's a big club and you're not in it?
Basically. So
on that one, what I found interesting, one was that Chris Wallace's father was also in news anchor, but back in the 60s he was then involved in the scandal. I think it was Nixon and Carter or whatever, and then for the debates they made up Carter with all makeup and made him look nice, but they didn't with Nixon and they made him look bad.
Yep.
And that then just made me thought of that the Pence debate where he had a fly on his head, and I said, was that all then set up to influence people, to make him look like an idiot looking bad? Was the fly real? Was it CGI? Was a little drone that you see like DARPA and those sort of guys all boasting about, these little sort of insect drones? Who knows?
If it's on mainstream media, it's crooked. If it's on mainstream media, it's a lie. It's a spin. It's manufactured. It's fantasy. We know that. Eventually the people will wake up.
I didn't know about the claims about Chris Wallace on Epstein's Island, even though someone could visit an island and not do anything untowards there. But I googled it, and apparently it's got USA Today doing fact-checking, saying Chris Wallace visited Jeffrey Epstein's Island is a claim, and then it goes on saying that it's untrue. The man in the image is George Clooney. Chris Wallace visited Clooney at Como, Italy. Apparently wasn't Epstein's Island. If you find contradictory information from a reliable source, please post about it in the comments. So everything has advantages and disadvantages. One example of Australia having compulsory voting, quote unquote, because it's not directly compulsory for everyone, but that's another video. The point is that, one, everyone's enfranchised, and two, everyone's responsible for picking who they want to win the election. If they are silly and throw away their vote, then really, who can they blame? Also, we don't have tactics like in the UK and USA where it is very easy to manipulate one's opposing side to not go out and vote. There are people in Australia that are particularly tricked by scams like the I do not consent scam or the vote of no confidence scam, whichever way you want to call it, my will scam, which just gets people who oppose the status quo to throw away their votes.
And one of the other ways they influence the election is through poll rigging. And as we saw with Trump on both elections, that what was the first one with Hillary Clinton, he was supposed to be, 95%, or she was supposed to win 95% by the polls, but that was completely incorrect. But by manipulating the polls, you're also manipulating people. People go, it's pointless going out and voting because my candidate's got no chance or whatever.
Correct. And that happens in Oz too, if you notice, because of the 4,000 kilometres between the east and the west coast. They'll call the election on the east coast, so all the west coast voters say, what's the point? And so the same tired old imbeciles are elected. So it's exactly the same.
It is a legitimate complaint about the election having results from the East Coast in Australia released before voting is finished in Western Australia and South Australia, as an example. And that was made popular or in the general awareness due to Clive Palmer in 2013, where he was threatening to take the AEC to the High Court to get an injunction to prevent that information from being released. That does influence voting, and it shouldn't be allowed, but, it is what it is at the moment.
And they don't even count the preferences correctly. It should be counted from the bottom up. They count from the top down. Liberal, Labor, who's got the most? Don't worry about the minor parties.
That is nonsense about counting the preferences from the bottom up or the top down. It doesn't even make sense. What it's referring to is two-party preferred voting, and I'll explain that in another video. But basically, they take who they believe will be the main candidates for each electorate, and there's a quick voting counting method, which is then backed up by a full count, but just to give an indication of who has won the election or not. So 2 points. Like I said about Riccardo Bosi, in my opinion, just takes what appears to be popular and running with it, despite whether that's accurate or not. So Karen Brewer famously, before she was sued successfully for $875,000, but living in New Zealand, may well have avoided some enforcement action, or maybe that's been undertaken, who knows. But she popularised that, this is very paraphrased, but that people who went to certain high schools, private schools, were Freemason demolays, and then it seems that her claims broadened and broadened and broadened to be anyone that ever went to any high school in Australia's a Freemason demolay, which is just ridiculous and moronic. But, it is what it is. And Karen Brewer also did a video once asking for my help, and then I replied about her being incorrect with the electoral system, with the my will letters or vote of no confidence, and then she didn't get back to me. But anyway, the second point is that, it's close enough what Riccardo's saying about electoral funding, about the $2.90 whatever cents, and then so many fractions of a cent per vote.
Once again, Tom Rogers, my good mate, and that's very sarcastic if you hadn't picked up on it, ladies and gentlemen, from the Royal Military College. Now, is he Masonic filth? I don't know. No evidence of it. It might be. I don't know, but he's not too sharp. But, he's making sure that the system doesn't work, or the result of his actions or inaction are making sure it doesn't work. So the fact that people think we have an election is a farce. We don't. We don't have an election. We have the illusion of choice. The illusion of choice. And that's why this election, you've got to work hard, put all the minors first, even the independents and minors you don't like. Put them before the majors. at least deny the majors that $2 something or other they get per vote. Because what the people don't know is you put Liberal Labor first, they get just under $3 a vote preference. So they pick up effectively, $20 odd million each either way, because there's about, well, it was 14 million voters in Oz. I think it's now punched up to about 17 million as an indication of the sheer frustration that the Australian people are feeling. So split that, and on a normal preference, that's 3 times 18, 54 million, about half each, because then the other first preferences go elsewhere. So they're picking up money. So they are just robbing you blind, ladies and gentlemen. Put the majors last.
If a candidate or Senate voting group gets more than 4% of the first preference formal votes, then, they do get money per vote, equaling roughly $2.90 per vote.
Put the majors last, for God's sake.
And another big way that the intel agencies or bigger entities manipulate elections is through what was exposed through Shadowgate. I don't know if you've seen that documentary. It was done by Millie Weaver, and the insider was Tory, who worked for Brennan. And they developed all this software where they could profile people through social media and then basically use algorithms to keep reinforcing those extremist tendencies in these people they had profiled, and then cause events. And they developed and used this for the Arab Spring. That's what created the Arab Spring. And then they've turned around and used that in the Summer of Love in America to cause all the riots there. We'd be naive to believe that the same thing isn't happening here, that our intel agencies or foreign intel agencies, whatever, are manipulating these things.
Of course, intelligence agents do manipulate elections as far as they can, and I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but again, everything has good and bad aspects to it. As an example, if a country, just say if Australia, could manipulate an election in country A, and that prevents country A from having someone who is saying, hey, we're going to blow up Australia or something, declare war on Australia, then potentially rigging that foreign election may prevent a lot of bloodshed here, just as an example. But, I'm not trying to justify things, but a lot of people don't think about why things are done, rather than just what things are done or potentially done. Also, the elephant in the room is how the media manipulates elections. And I do have a video about, for instance, some corruption allegations against a Labor politician who's now a state MP, that person was going to be investigated by a certain newspaper, and then apparently that person then purchased advertising space for their particular political party and candidates and stuff like that in the space that was going to be occupied by the massive corruption scandal to do with New South Wales and prohibited donations, after we just had, I think it was 10 New South Wales members of parliament for the state parliament, technically members of the Legislative Assembly, that were removed for the exact same thing. Basically, with the media, if an organisation is paying them lots of money and they have alternative media that they could use, then they are very reluctant, generally speaking, to write any articles adverse to that party or their candidates, unless it's like, hey, throw the book at this candidate so we can ignore all the other issues with the party or other candidates, as an example.
Well, apparently Australia's played a bigger role in this whole war of the world for the bad guys than has previously been suspected. We thought that we were, just on the back end of the planet, not all that important. What we didn't realise is that we are really important to the whole setup, and we've got a lot of people in the Australian intel agencies, the standard rundown, the polity, the bureaucracy, the judiciary and the intelligence agencies and the police. A lot of those people will be going to jail for a very, very, very long time.
So, using the tool of playing devil's advocate, which has nothing to do with worshipping Satan or anything, before some nutjobs claim that I'm therefore declaring allegiance to, X, Y, Z. But if the agencies are really like that, which they may well be, or maybe they're not, then would they let Riccardo get away with things if he is genuinely, coming up with this thing like hang the politicians and, these people are going to pay, etc. I won't get into about potential controlled opposition or anything like that, but why is Bosi still able to even run in elections? Why hasn't he been charged with certain offences, as an example, if those offences do have prima facie or on the face of it have occurred?
When the truth comes out, and as I said, they have everything.
Excellent. The Solomon Islands just signed a defence pact with China, and China's been using a lot of this debt trap diplomacy, which we saw from Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I believe...
Whether it's true or not, John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and apparently there's a new version as well, is very interesting to read. I may put a link in a description where you can buy that book, either the new version or the old one. I'm not sure if the new version's just updated version of the old one or if it is a sequel.
Vanuatu now has a wharf that was built specifically for cruise ships, but it happens to be the perfect size for a Chinese aircraft carrier.
So just to explain that for the people, China will come up to a country and say, look, we're going to help you out, we'll loan you the money to build this facility for your economic development, knowing full well the country can never repay that debt. So then China says, look, you can't repay the debt, we'll just take ownership of the facility. Now, I think it was Scott Morrison yesterday said, look, we're not a colonial power, but they're free to make up their own mind. My God, I don't know who's writing your excuses, Slow-Mo, but you've got to come up with some smarter ones, because that's not very brilliant. Because this sort of operation, this infiltration of nations takes generations, it takes decades. And I can remember back in 1991, when I was in PNG, China was, even as a young captain, out in the middle of the jungle, even I learned then that China was infiltrating in every possible way PNG because it's an area of strategic interest to Australia. And the Australians were not interested, not doing much because they weren't supposed to. And so the fact that all of a sudden this deal is signed, to assume that it happened quickly is naive. To assume that there's nothing could have been done about it is wrong. Our area of strategic national interest, Slow-Mo, and this goes for Albo as well and his idiot Richard Marles, who previously said we should have a closer military relationship with China. You're not doing your job. We know you're not doing your job. We know you don't even know how to do the job. We know that. But for goodness sake, can you lie a little bit more cleverly? Because it's just patent bullshit. It is so wrong. The fact that we now have allowed, and by we I mean both the Liberal, Labor, Nationals and Greens are really in on it, that we have allowed a malevolent power to take a foothold in our area of strategic interest is a strategic failure of epic proportions. It should never have got this far. They should never have been allowed outside the South China Sea. They should never have been allowed a lot of places. But they've been allowed to do this because that's the agenda. China itself is not a sovereign nation, it's a criminal cartel. But the system they have in place, the social credit system, the method of control of their people, has been trialled in China and being rolled out across the planet. And here's the last one for you if you didn't know.
So that is an accurate summary of so-called debt traps or economic hitman activity. And it's been going on for a long time. It's not just China doing that, of course. They're really playing catch-up, even though, I guess, a long time ago, in ancient China, when it was first expanding, they used to do similar, when China was the premier superpower in the world. But anyway, Riccardo then says about his experiences in Papua New Guinea, which, I have no reason to doubt that particular aspect of what he's saying is accurate. Australia does have close ties militarily with China, closer than, it should be, really. I remember a few years ago they had Major retired, Les Hiddens, and he's also known as a bush tucker man, and he was showing Chinese soldiers as a part of like a cultural exchange or something like that with China, how to survive in the Australian bush. This is good bush tucker, this is no good, poison, whatever. So, that is very peculiar. And, it's an area where things should be investigated if they're more beneficial or more disadvantageous.
Remember the people were talking about this insane tinfoil hat idea that we were going to be chipped and then monitored? Well, guess what? If you've been vaxxed, you now have a code. So a reader can walk past you, and the gentleman showed me. And it's got all the codes. You are now barcoded. You now have a registered number. You are now products, and they can control you. Again, 2.5 years ago, I said, be careful of 5G and the rest, and they laughed, and we were right. And now we're saying, ladies and gentlemen, if you've been jabbed, you now have a barcode inside you that can be read by a phone, and it'll just differentiate between a device and a person. And the little logo comes up, this is a person, and there's a long number. That's you. That's your number. You are now controlled. It's part of the transhumanist issue. But I'll tell you what, keep taking the jab, folks. Keep taking the jab.
That is definitely not accurate. So a couple of years ago, there was yet again a misinterpretation of a product called AppyJet, and basically there is a chip to track batches, etc., on the packaging of the vaccine, and then they could know that, they'd beep the tracking device and add that to the record so that the person would know, hey, look, I received the Pfizer XYZ vaccine on this date, at this place, at this time, batch number, 17254 or whatever. And it was in the packaging, the little near-field communication chip. There really is something called luciferase, though, that, you shine UV light and it can glow. But that's a separate issue. That's not a barcode where, it says this is individual 1725443, however many numbers, to barcode billions of people in the world.
I saw a story, whatever you want to call it, on 60 Minutes, at least 12 months, 24 months ago, on how the Chinese are still trying to do this with Bougainville, and how they've put huge plans in for Bougainville and pouring money into them. And that's right on our doorstep.
Correct.
With the one in Vanuatu, is it just pure luck that they invested in something which they called a cruise ship terminal, but like if they default on their loan, it will turn into a naval shipyard? But that happened right before the pandemic. It was almost as if they knew the cruise ship industry might have some difficulties ahead.
No, sheer coincidence. But what's I was saying, how many coincidences before it becomes?
Mathematically impossible.
There you go.
Well, cruise ships are coming back, for one, and, it is a coincidence. It's like people saying, XYZ person predicted that there would one day be some global event with viruses or whatever, a super pandemic or whatever. Then obviously if people say that for hundreds of years or, tens of years or whatever, then a pandemic's certain to occur within a certain time period. They might not know when, might be 10 years, 100 years, etc. And I'm not saying about people that say specific claims like, Fauci supposedly said there will be a pandemic within this administration, being the Trump one, which may or may not have been coincidental. But you get the point. Also, Vanuatu hosting Chinese missiles is not a good thing as an example, but, unfortunately, in a way, the West has given up on colonialism, but then other people, such as China, have taken it up, and particularly in places like Africa and the Pacific.
We're getting the same briefs.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, mate.
Thank you.
I've just found an extract of the original Rice and Onions video, and with this particular video, it is between Dave Oneggs, i.e. David Oneglio, and Riccardo Bosi, and it is a very fiery exchange after Bosi himself is asked if he's a Freemason, which Karen Brewer had suggested, and then Riccardo Bosi goes on a tirade and then brings up false claims by Adrian John Wells about the Prime Minister being allegedly a kiddie molester, etc., which of course there's no evidence that that's true, and Adrian John Wells is a liar. I'll do a separate video on that where he's claiming he's an astronaut and a 4-year-old as an example. But again, you know, fair enough, being accused of things impassions people, but then why is he falsely accusing other people? And then he also makes certain claims, which I don't endorse, about Clive Palmer and Craig Kelly and some other people. But interesting video that David got such a reaction. Just a quick warning about the profane language, the cussing, swearing, whatever you want to call it, in case you are hypersensitive to that, or more importantly, if you are listening in some public space, or you know, you might have your children around or something like that, young children.
If people want to know how can they trust you, how can they be sure that you're not part of this cabal? People throw around the term like controlled opposition. Someone said, "Oh, Riccardo Bosi, he's a Freemason as well." What's your response to that?
First of all, don't trust me. Trust yourself. This is what being a fucking adult's about, you wankers. Controlled opposition, fuck off. I know who the controlled opposition is, and you look at it most of the night on TV. So get off your lazy asses, do some fucking research, and realise you make your mind up. And if you get it right, 10 out of 10. If you fuck up, it's on you. Don't fucking trust me. And if you do, you're a fucking idiot. Do your fucking homework. And on the balance of probabilities, make a decision and own it. Because the people that are going, "Ooh, I don't know what to do," fuck off. I fucking mean it. You fucking tossers. Grow up. Get a pair of fucking stones. If you don't trust me, go start your own fucking political party. Go save somebody. Go deliver a meal to somebody who's hungry. Go fight for some guy whose daughter's 14 years of age with fucking leukemia and the doctors are trying to fucking poison her with a jab. Because that's the shit that we do on a daily fucking basis. Controlled fucking opposition. You've been living with controlled opposition. Ring up Morrison and ask him if he's a fucking pedophile. Go on. You brave fucking keyboard warriors that never once risked a fucking thing. I spent 24 fucking years in the army protecting sickos like you, not you, David, but the fuckers that never done anything. And now my family and I have given up everything for this. Fucking Freemason. If I was a Mason, they'd have fucking hung me by now, you dumb cunt. Fucking seriously, grow up, do your fucking research. You don't like me? I don't give a shit. I don't fucking care. Oh, don't you want votes? No, I want to save the fucking country. There's a big difference. There's controlled opposition every day talking to you. And I bet you these cockheads are part of that controlled opposition. This has cost me fucking everything. Okay, here's a little one to finish on. You know what I eat on a daily fucking basis? Rice and onions. You know why? Now, I've got food in the pantry for my kids. They get a decent feed. But I'm eating rice and fucking onions sometimes because that's all I've got for me. So I'll tell you what, I'll go dollar for fucking dollar, and I'll bet you you've got more money in your account than I do. And I bet you you eat better than I do on a regular fucking basis. And I'll bet you've done nothing in your entire miserable fucking life that didn't involve satisfying your selfish fucking needs. You wouldn't understand duty and sacrifice if you fucking tripped over it. So all you fucking idiots out there that want to worry about controlled opposition, you should, but they're in fucking government, you fucking morons. Every fucking politician is aware that there is a list of 28 VIP pedophiles. Not fucking one has mentioned it. And Craig fucking Kelly, oh, I don't know anything about it. You want controlled opposition? Go see fucking Clive Palmer and Craig fucking Kelly. He's a fucking politician. This came out years. He's been in Parliament for fucking 10 years or more. Never asked a fucking question. You want controlled opposition? You want to know a party that's going to give votes to the Liberal Party? Go see fucking Clive Palmer. Clive Palmer's the guy that made $3.8 billion from the Chinese Communist Party this year. I'm fucking broke. Palmer's fucking stinking rich while the Chinese Communists, through their corrupted government, is killing Australians, you fucking morons. I am sick to fucking death of it. I don't give a flying fuck whether you like me or vote for me. Fuck off. Go vote for Fat Boy Palmer and the pedophile protectors. Because you scumbuckets are the reason we're in this fucking problem. You know why? Because a lot of people don't know. And those that do know are too fucking lazy and too fucking scared to do the fucking job. So get off my fucking back and fucking put your face on screen and go risk your fucking life. You fucking cowards. And I fucking mean, I've had a gutful of this shit. They can fuck off. And don't ask me another fucking question about David or fucking hang up on you. I've had a fuck enough. I've spent my entire fucking life serving this fucking country. And these two-cent fucking wankers that spend 90% of their time looking at porn on the internet, the other 10% bagging somebody else, fucking grow up.
It was an interesting interview, though, by the Galactic Larrikins. And, you know, it's an interesting channel. That concludes this particular video. Thank you very much for your time. Please like, share, subscribe. Consider donating to my PayPal account, which is paypal.me/RJ Martin. That's ARJAYMARTIN. I'll put the link below. It does take approximately 1 day to do a video like this. And, you know, it would be helpful to be rewarded for the great information I'm putting out. Thank you very much. Bye. Authorised by RJ Martin, Gold Coast, Queensland.
Listening to, and you can almost see the producer in the back going, cut, he's killing you. Within 24 hours, our foreign minister, that bloated cow, our foreign minister, was saying, oh, well, the leadership of the World Health might be a bit dodgy at times, but essentially they do good work. So I knew I'd hit them hard exactly where it mattered. And Maurice Payne, our foreign minister, Maurice Payne, if we hang her, I'm not sure she's guilty of anything. And if she's not, good luck to her, but if she is, we're going to have to get an arrestor cable off an aircraft carrier to suspend the weight. Now, see, that's a rude thing. I say that sort of thing all the time.